Hi, welcome to Doctor's Homestead. My name's Daniel, and I wanted to dig into something we've spoken about many times before. There's an article I've referenced before. It's the surprisingly solid mathematical case of the tinfoil hat gun prepper. It's on Recoil Web. It was published about 4 years ago. It's a great article. I think there's a lot of good information. I've sent the link to a lot of people that wonder why should I be a prepper? Why should I prepare for anything? And we're going to dig into that, but I want to read a little bit from the article. So it says, as gun policy discussions, and it's interesting because this is 4 years ago, and you see how things don't always change. A lot of this is the same. So as gun policy discussions unfold in the wake of mass shooter incidents, they routinely end in three buckets. There's the tyranny can never happen here bucket, which the left has mostly educated in the wake of Trump winning. They called and still call him a tyrant. There's the you can't fight the army with small arms bucket, which is increasingly unsound given our ongoing decade and a half war with Afghan tribal goat herders. And there's the what the hell do you need an AR-15 for anyway bucket, which by its very language eschews a fundamental lack of understanding of what those people are thinking. I'm not a prepper, the author says, but I know a few. Some of the ones I know are smart. They may not be doing as deep an analysis as I present here on a mathematical level, but the smart ones are definitely doing it at a subconscious level. If you want to understand the perspectives of others, as everyone in my opinion should strive to do, then you would do well to read the end of this article to where we're going. We will need to discuss the general framework of disaster mathematics. So the author is a hydrologist. He says the author claims to be a stormwater hydrologist. In my opinion, a pretty good one. Hydrology is the science of tracking water as it moves through the water cycle from ocean evaporation through cloud formation, precipitation, groundwater infiltration, runoff, evapotranspiration, riverine hydraulics, and the time series of behavior of reservoirs. It's a deep and fascinating field, but one of its most relevant applications to our lives is delineating floodplain boundaries. So essentially it's the mathematics they use to determine the likelihood of a flood. If you have a house, you have flood insurance, or if you're in a floodplain, you have flood insurance. Not everyone has flood insurance, and that insurance is based on the likelihood of a flood, and hydrology mathematicians determine that likelihood. It's a big part of the insurance process. So essentially what the author does is take that hydrology mathematics and places it on the odds of some kind of civil unrest happening in the United States. So it says, while we do not have any good sources of data on how often zombies take over the world, we definitely have good sources of data on when the group of people on the piece of dirt we currently call the United States attempt to overthrow the government. It's happened twice since colonization. The first one, the American Revolution, succeeded. The second one, the Civil War, failed, but they're both qualifying events, and now we can do the math. So essentially he says, just like a 100-year flood, hey, there was a flood here, there was a flood here, so what's the likelihood in 65 years there'll be another flood based on those events? So how it works. Do the same math as we did above, and with the floodplains, and it's precisely the same way, and we see a 37% chance that any American of average life expectancy will experience at least one nationwide violent revolution. So at any point in American history, in anyone's lifespan, there's about a 37% chance of some kind of civil unrest, some kind of violent revolution, using hydrology math based on prior events, things that have happened before. So if you look at today, if you look at what's happening today, what happened recently, which I'm probably not going to dig in too much, a lot of people are saying 1 inch from Civil War, and I can't really disagree. I'm not attempting to encourage or incite anything, but to say 1 inch from Civil War, to say 37% chance at any point, even in good times, seems like we're inching closer, right? Inching closer to some kind of nationwide violent revolution, as reading in the article. And you could say, oh, well, two events don't make a pattern. So he digs into the rest of the world. So since our 1678 benchmark, Russia has had 2 world wars, a civil war, a revolution, at least half a dozen uprisings, depending on how you want to count them. Well, depending on when you start the clock, France had a 30-year war, a 7-year war, particularly nasty revolution, a counter-revolution, that Napoleon thing, and a couple world wars tacked on to the end. China, North Korea, Vietnam, and basically most of the Pacific Rim has had some flavor of violent revolution in the last 100 years, sometimes more than once. Africa, it's hard to conceive where to start and end the data points. Mostly Central and South American countries have had significant qualifying events in the time span, and honestly, if we were to widen our analysis, not only include nationwide violent civil wars, but also instances of slavery, internment, and taking of native lands, our numbers go way up. We could look at a modern snapshot counting places like the Vatican. We have 195 countries on the planet today. Somalia is basically in perpetual war. Syria is a hot mess with no signs of mitigation anytime soon. Iraq is sketchy. Afghanistan has been in some flavor of civil war occupation my entire life, outside of the salad days of the Taliban. And Libya is such deep throes of anarchy that they're reinvented the African slave trade. Venezuela, the Israel-Palestinian conflict may be a qualifying event depending on how you define it. So that was 4 years ago before we have the new Israel-Palestinian conflict, but they certainly have had plenty of conflicts in the past. And again, Africa, it's hard to even convince where to start. Spitballing, perhaps 3% of the nations of the world are in the same version of violent revolt against the ruling government, some worse than others. There's at least some case to be made that our 0.5% annual chance estimate may be low if we're looking at comps. Or we could look at a broader historical brush. Since the fall of Constantinople in 1453, there have been 465 sovereign nations which no longer exist, and then that doesn't even count colonies, secessionist states, or annexed countries. And if we presume that half of these nation-state transitions are peaceful, which is probably a vast overestimation, there's still an average of one violent state transition every 2.43 years since 1678. So that's from the article. It's a great article. Highly recommend it. It's hard to argue with his point. Either the 37% chance in your lifetime of some kind of violent revolution in America, whether 1 inch from civil war, as some people are saying, or you just take it as across the world, there's a violent state transition every 2.43 years since 1678. That seems to be the world we live in, where peaceful civilization is the outlier, right? It's not the norm. So what can you do, right? What can you do? Do you need to do anything? What if you just do nothing? And I know a lot of people out there do nothing. They just live their lives, and that's okay. I'm not telling you not to. Certainly that is the easiest way to go. Play the odds. 37% means what? 63% chance nothing's going to happen. You're going to be all right. Or you become a prepper, you become a homesteader. That's what we push on this channel. That's what I'm trying to lean into with a lot of these videos. Learn to be self-sufficient, right? Store food, store water, store essentials. Learn how to replenish those stores. No amount of food stored or water stored will last you the rest of your life unless you have a very short life. It's hard to store a lot of water, right? We need a gallon a day. You need your calories every day, so ultimately if you're leaning into prepping, if you're leaning into homesteading, it's learning how to replenish those, how to gather water, how to treat water, how to grow food, right? How to harvest food, foraging, hunting, animal husbandry, all those things. All those things are good to learn. And they're all things we push on this channel, at least try to give ideas. I don't think I'm pushing anything on anybody, but they're ideas we play with on the channel. Certainly the life we try to live with the chickens and the pigs and the turkeys. You can't see them, but I can see them all here from where I'm sitting. You know, learn to replenish, survival skills, things like self-defense. Those are all good skills, right? I mean, if you're looking at why should I prepare, ignoring everything that's going on in the world right now, which is quite significant, even if none of this had happened, even if you roll back the article 4 or 5 years to when it was written, you could still make the argument 37% chance. I think you look at things now, I would say it's probably higher, right? And that's just my opinion. Once again, not trying to incite, just giving speculation based on what people are saying, right? It does seem like we're in a situation where those kind of events might be more likely than usual, whether it's World War III, whether it's some kind of major civil event, or another pandemic, right? Bird flu is still, lurking on the edges. You hear talk about number of infections growing. You hear talk about vaccines. You hear all the things you'd expect to hear, and that seems to be circling around. Certainly a lot of people say they won't comply, and I can't say I disagree with that. Certainly understand where that's coming from, but whether it's pandemic, war, civil unrest, whatever it is something to consider as possible, right? And whether you choose to ignore it or you choose to prepare in the event something like that happens is certainly a personal decision. We would encourage, being that I was a Boy Scout, to consider what you might do if something like that happens, right? We encourage being prepared on this channel, not to the extent that you forget to live your life. You certainly want to live your life, enjoy your life, but be prepared in case something happens. So wanted to share that, wanted to dig into the topic a little bit. So as always, hope that helps out. Thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.